Welcome to Shamrock Reddit Stories, Entitled People Edition, where an entitled woman expects the gas station to reimburse her for the gasoline that she spills. Let's get to it. This one's from Ali Pooley, and it's called My Entitled Neighbor Stole My Garage. Twice. Okay, long story warning. Perhaps stole is a strong word here, but I'm just so mad about the entitled attitude of this person. I live in a town northeast of England, and I'm originally from Wales. I own a house in Wales that I've been renting out for the last 10 years. Everything has been super smooth until a year ago. The tenant stopped paying rent while making multiple promises to pay. In the end, I got so frustrated that I decided to sell the place. I cut my losses on the outstanding rent, about £3,000, and told the tenant if he left by a certain date, I'd write off the rent. The tenant goes over the deadline by a couple of weeks, but he ultimately leaves. However, the house is in a terrible condition. The tenant had painted many of the walls bright orange and had gotten this paint everywhere, including the carpet and skirting boards. The oven had half-cooked rotten food. He'd been too lazy to put rubbish in the outside bin, so he simply threw it in the shed. A bit of a side story for context. I live 6 hours away, but my mom and stepfather live 30 minutes away. I've decided to sell, but of course I can't sell the house in its current state. My mom has generously offered to help, and we set a date for me to come back down to start the work. We order a skip, etc. 2 solid work days later, and the place is looking much better. It's not going to win House of the Year, but enough to sell. One of the issues is that we can't seem to get the garage key to work. My stepfather promises to come the following week and drill the lockout. Fast forward to the following week, and my stepfather is in the process of drilling the lockout when he's interrupted by a neighbor who we will call EN for Entitled Neighbor. Entitled Neighbor: "Excuse me, can you please stop doing that? You're damaging my garage." Stepfather: Actually, this garage belongs to my stepson who is selling this house. Entitled Neighbor: "Well, I've been using this garage for the last 12 months, so he has no right." Stepfather: What? Turns out that the entitled neighbor noticed that the tenant wasn't using the garage. So he drilled out the locks, swapped a new lock, and started using it himself. When it was finally opened, it was full to the brim with his stuff. He didn't think anyone would notice. I find out the information and call him, telling him he has 24 hours to empty the garage and replace the lock. He can't do it within 24 hours, apparently, but apologizes and promises to drop the new keys through the letterbox in a few days. It's annoying, but luckily it's all working out, and I don't want to cause too much hassle with the neighbor. My mom visited the house the following week, picked up the key, opened the garage, and yes, it was now empty. Job done. Fast forward 6 months. The house is sold. Arranging key, handover, etc. However, I get a text from the new owner the following day. Under the sale contract, it's my responsibility to ensure the house and any buildings are empty for the sale. Otherwise, I can be liable for the cost, etc. Straight away, I know what's happened and call the entitled neighbor. Turns out he kept a spare key on the lock change. Yes, in hindsight, I should have installed my own lock, but I didn't think anyone would be that stupid. He noticed that no one was using the garage, so he decided to start using it again. I was furious. He couldn't understand why I was so mad. "But you weren't using it, so what's the big issue?" "Well, did you ask my permission?" "No." "Does the garage belong to you?" "No." "What do you expect?" I gave him 1 hour to clear the garage before I call the police and order a clearance company to empty the garage. The sheer cheek of the man. Anyway, it's all sorted out now. The garage is empty, the locks have been changed, and having sold the property, the entitled neighbor is now someone else's problem. The neighbor was kinda right. OP wasn't using the garage. What's the big deal anyway? Just kidding. That was pretty cheeky of the neighbor. What do we call it on this side of the pond? Oh yeah, ballsy. If you like what we're doing here, why don't you hit those like, subscribe, and notification buttons so that you don't miss an episode of Shamrock Reddit Stories. As soon as we hit 1 million subscribers, Seamus has promised me good fortune. He really doesn't pull his weight around here, and I would really like to get something for all the hassle of putting up with him. This one is from Squiggly Clee, and it's called Woman Spills Her Gas and Expects Us to Pay for It. I work at a fuel station that's part of a grocery chain. We start closing procedures about an hour before lockup and start shutting down sections in sequence. Hot foods, hot drinks, frozen foods, etc. I was in the back washing up the trays from our hot food when my coworker, who was manning the register, called me up because there was a spill at one of our pumps. Now, one of the rules for a fuel station is fuel spills are a priority over everything. So I drop what I'm doing, grab my coat, and head outside to clean up the spill before it either becomes too large or makes it into the sewer system. One requires the fire department to be called, and the other requires the EPA to be called. And I do not want to deal with either of those when we should be heading home in like half an hour. While pouring the Cobb over the spill, a woman starts yelling out to me from inside the store. Cobb is a ground-up substance that absorbs oil-based spills but lets water pass through. I ask her to hold on a moment while I get the 60-square-foot puddle covered so it will stop spreading. While the Cobb starts soaking up the spill, I get back inside and ask what happened. I didn't realize that I had just met the entitled woman of this story. The entitled woman starts ranting that the nozzle is broken and just fell off, and that she wants reimbursement for the spilled fuel. My coworker was about 2 weeks on the job, and since this was a situation that she wasn't prepped for yet, she waited for me to handle it. I explained to the entitled woman that we're normally not liable for losses due to spills, but if it is an equipment malfunction, we will reimburse the customer. I head back to check the security cameras. All the while, the woman is complaining that she is running late for work and now she has gas all over the front of her. I apologize, asking her to understand that it's policy, not even store policy, as fuel has many government restrictions on it, which is true. No gas station in the United States is liable for spills with the exception of faulty equipment or personnel error in states where it is a requirement that an attendant dispense fuel instead of the customer. Keep in mind that auto shutoff is excluded, as it is not considered mandatory equipment. Anyway, I see on the camera that entitled woman puts the nozzle into her huge Hummer and goes around the other side to take some trash out and walk around behind her vehicle to throw it away. Now, instead of either walking back around or waiting for the gas to finish pumping, entitled woman decides to lift the hose over her head and duck under it to get back to the driver door. This makes the nozzle fall out, since she is essentially pulling on the hose. The funny part is, when she picks it up, she doesn't release the handle to stop it and sprays gas all over the front of herself and the side of her car. She then places the nozzle on the ground while still dispensing to come inside and say it's broken. It was actually the man at the pump behind her who turned off the nozzle and hung it up, keeping it from spilling further. At this point, any fricks I have are gone. I explain that she will get nothing for the spilled gas because nothing was broken, and the nozzle came out because she pulled it out while trying to limbo under it. We are not responsible for her screw-up. I head back out to start sweeping up the now absorbed spill. My coworker tells entitled woman the hours the manager will be here tomorrow. She follows me outside, continuing to prattle on about how I will be giving her a refund for the spilled gas. My switch is firmly into the I don't give an F position now, though. So I keep my answer short while continuing my cleaning, not even looking at her the entire time. Entitled woman: You will give me my money. I'm not leaving until you do. Me: No, I won't, and you're late for work. Entitled woman: Why do I have to pay for your broken machine? Me: Because it's not broken. Entitled woman: It fell right out. Me: You pulled it out. Entitled woman: I've been pumping gas for 14 years. I know how to do it. Me: Bound to be one mistake in 14 years. Entitled woman's fuming. I'll be back tomorrow morning to get my money from the manager. Me. I promise you won't. Entitled woman. I'll have your job for this. Do you know who I work for? Me. Your shift starts at 10 p.m. No position like that gives your threat any credibility. She drives off after this. I leave a memo for the opening manager to expect a visit or call. As it turns out, she did call, but 2 hours after the manager was scheduled out, which entitled woman was told the night before. The manager even stayed an hour late to be there for the visit or call. The manager was also going to be out of state for the next 2 days, so she would have to wait until the following Monday to be helped, as only the manager has the clearance for a fuel refund to actually process on our registers. The entitled woman swore at the person taking the call, saying that she works nights and just effing woke up. And even though that conversation went around in circles several times, she did not grasp that there was nobody there to help her until Monday, because she never showed up for the visit she claimed she was going to make. I find a week later that while I was initially spreading the cod, that entitled woman was so irate and my coworker was so frightened that she took a $20 bill from her own purse to give to the entitled woman for the refund because she didn't know how to ring it out on the register. There normally isn't a way. I didn't know it was that bad inside, as there wasn't any aggression when I was initially told about the spill, until after I went to check the cameras. The entitled woman was also claiming to be calling her boyfriend to get him and his friend to come up and get the refund for her. Loss Prevention found out about it, and the entitled woman was charged with robbery because she took money from my coworker under threats of violence. She was also barred from any store our company owns within all 6 states. The icing on the cake. The credit card she used for gas was a fleet card her work provides her, one of our fleet cards, because her company was actually contracted under ours. That card she can no longer use. All that Seamus has to say about Karen losing her fleet card is, ruh-roh. This one's from Magic Mama 24, and it's called Entitled Church Group Wants to Heal My Blindness, but when it doesn't work, I am told I just don't believe in God enough. Hello, this happened a fair amount of years ago, yet I remember it like it was yesterday. I'm now a 25-year-old legally blind female in a small town in Oregon. I was the only blind person at my high school and one of the few disabled people in general. A female friend invited me to an after-school church crew for teenagers. I went, considering I had been there before and enjoyed the time spent. There was lots of singing and dancing, which is quite typical for this type of group. I was having a great time. At one point, this woman, who was actually the sister of the friend who invited me, called for all the kids to put their hands on my head. They began speaking in tongues, asking God to heal my eyes of blindness. I had no idea what to do at the time and was understandably freaked out at this point. So I just stood there while they asked their God for something I think they very well knew would never happen. So guess what happened? Absolutely nothing. At this point, I am sitting alone at the table crying, without even my so-called friend to comfort me. That's when a pastor of some type, I think he was the youth pastor, came to sit across the table from me. He proceeds to inform me that I must not believe that God can do anything, or else God would have healed my eyes. I cried to him and said that I think God must want me to be blind, that he must have a plan. Once again, this guy disagrees with me and restates his stance. I didn't even argue at this point. My heart was broken. Keep in mind that I, up until recently, was very ashamed and insecure about my disability, but I had finally learned to accept myself for who I am. Yet here was this supposed man of God telling me that I am not a good enough believer. I was around 14 years old at the time, so I was pretty dang impressionable. This incident hurt me more than I could say. I never went back to that group, and my relationship with said friend was never the same after that. This had not been the first time that a church group of some kind was ridiculously out of line, but that's a post for another day. Looking back on it now, I feel this church group, as well as their pastor, desperately wanted a miracle to happen that could bring glory to their church. According to them, when it didn't happen, it had to have been my fault. Now, Seamus and I hesitated to tell this story because we didn't want to give anyone the impression that we are against organized religion. We aren't. It's not religion who is the villain here. It's human nature at its worst that is responsible for OP's horrible experience. Not worst, mind you, but worse. This so-called youth pastor has no business influencing young, impressionable minds if he is going to take this kind of attitude with a disabled person like OP is. Okay, I'll stop ranting now and let you guys get on with your lives. Until next time.